Let's start the way we always do. Given the skyrocketing rates of loneliness, depression, anxiety, and suicide since the release of the first iPhone in 2007 and Android phone a year later, we can say that our first attempt as human beings at creating healthy social relationships has largely failed. I'm Dr. Anthony Silard, your host of ReSocial. Are you the type of person who values nothing more in your life than your close relationships? If you are, ReSocial was created for you. We bring in the top thought leaders in the world at the nexus of research and practice to help you rediscover, reflect on, and renew the CMSRs, the compassionate, meaningful, sustainable relationships in your life. Let's get started so you can create the life you have imagined, a life filled with CMSRs. Have you ever had someone in your life who clearly cared about you, and yet for some reason you couldn't put your finger on, you still did not feel loved? You weren't making that up. It turns out there's a real gap between being loved and feeling loved. Hello, I'm your host, Dr. Anthony Silard, and welcome to ReSocial, where we reflect on and renew how we approach social relationships so we can develop CMSRs, compassionate, meaningful, sustainable relationships. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Sonja Lyubomirsky, one of the leading happiness researchers and author of How to Feel Loved. She spent decades studying what actually moves the needle on human connection, and her latest research reveals something that changes everything. The gap between being loved and feeling it is something we can actually do something about. Dr. Sonja Lyubomirsky, welcome to ReSocial.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. Happy to talk about love and happiness.
I have been looking forward to this for a long time. I remember reading your book, The How of Happiness, long time ago. And then when you came out with How to Feel Loved, which I have right here, I love this book because it's going beyond happiness to, I think, one of the most critical ingredients, if not the most critical ingredient for happiness, which is close relationships and how we can develop them. So Sonja, most researchers study what fascinates them from the outside, but the best ones usually have a more personal reason. They say that it's not research, it's me search. So what first made you care about whether people feel loved, not as a scientific question, but as a human one you could personally relate to?
Well, I have to start with happiness, right? Because that's what I've been studying for most of my career. And I've always been interested in happiness and like, why is it that people are so different? Some people are a lot happier than others. I also had a really unhappy childhood. And then became a really happy adult. And so I've always also been interested in like how people can become happier. And then I spent, I think, 28 years, I'm still doing it, doing what I call happiness interventions, which are basically clinical trials, but instead of testing a vaccine or a medication, we're testing a happiness practice. We do randomized controlled trials to test whether, say, expressing gratitude or doing acts of kindness or simply, talking to your barista makes you happier. And then I realized one day something, kind of an insight came to me, an epiphany, if you will, that all of the interventions that work to make us happier, the reason they work is they make us feel more loved, basically. They make us feel more connected to others. And so, love is, on the personal side, love is actually one of my strengths. Someone actually was asking me the other day, like, what are your strengths? And I'm like, my top strength is actually love, like being loving, and I'm very affectionate. And that's something very important to me. But it just turns out also that feeling connected and feeling loved, defined broadly, is really the key to happiness. And so I know that sounds like a cliche, yeah. But a lot of powerful ideas, when you condense them into one sentence, sound like cliches, right? So that's where it came from.
Well, and I can relate to that, the part about the unhappy childhood and how that, and also it's interesting how sometimes the voids in our lives kind of shape our vision for what we want to change in the world. Also, I'm really happy to hear you share how love is essentially the key to happiness.
Feeling
Yeah,
loved and feeling connected is the key to
feeling
happiness.
loved
Yeah.
and feeling connected. And that squares so well with Robert Waldinger's research, the Harvard study of adult development, where they found that they studied men, but it was the same. Other studies, including yours, have found the same for women, where the men who had the closest relationships, who felt the most loved in middle age, were the ones who were happiest in older age. So I think regardless of where we are on the lifespan, close, meaningful relationships are the closest we have, I think, that psychologists have found to a panacea for long-term well-being.
Absolutely. And absolutely. But what we're adding to that conversation is that it's not just having relationships that matters. It's sort of feeling loved in those relationships, right? Because
Mm,
you can be loved but not feel loved. We actually did, my co-author Harry Reese and we did a survey expressly for the book. And we asked people, and we found that 70% said that there's at least one relationship in their life that where they are loved, but they don't feel loved. They want to feel
mm,
more loved. And 40% said they wanted to feel more loved by their romantic partner. And I actually think those numbers are understatements. For some reason, I think they're actually higher than this particular survey found. We'll have to do more surveys. But that is really, really critical. See, it's kind of like loneliness. Like you could be surrounded by people, but still be lonely.
mhm,
So you can be loved and not feel loved. Or it's like you can be beautiful. We all know people who are beautiful, but they don't feel beautiful. We know people
mhm.
who are smart, but they don't think they're smart, right? So it's a little bit like that.
And Sonja, in your survey and in your research, do you find a high correlation between low self-esteem and not feeling loved? Like, is it that because I can tell you for myself, the times in my life where I haven't felt loved, part of it also, especially since I've been married in the last few decades, it's really been sometimes like, okay, I'm feeling down on myself for this reason or another reason, and then I don't feel as loved, and then I do kind of a check-in with myself, and I'm like, okay, well, I guess I need to feel loved by myself first, and then I can allow those feelings in from others. And what's your take on that?
Yeah, I think that definitely there's definitely a relation between sort of how much you love yourself and how much you feel love from others. And when we have this metaphor in the book, like imagine like I'll just use this that like this is your cup of love,
Hmm.
and your romantic partner, your friends, your family are sort of pouring love into the cup of love. But let's say there's a leak in the bottom, and so it's not quite staying in; it's leaking out. Or maybe the top has a very small opening, so it's not quite getting in. So that's kind of
Mm.
one way to think about how whether it's because of attachment. This is really a metaphor for attachment. If you're anxiously attached or avoidantly attached, or if you have low self esteem, that you're somehow like not noticing it. You're not, it's not getting in, or you're not trusting it. So there's different reasons why people might not actually feel that love.
Well, and I love that you've been exploring those in How to Feel Loved in your wonderful book. Well, most research on love looks at the love you feel for other people, and in How to Feel Loved, you flip the script, and you're focused on the love you experience other people feeling for you. And what led you there? And what do you think we've been missing all this time by not asking this question sooner? I think you're the first to really focus on it.
Yeah, and Harry Reese, my co-author, is a very eminent relationship scientist, love scientist. As I teamed up with him, and so he's actually the one who taught me sort of this what you just said, that like almost all the research is about sort of expressing love and showing love for others. And yet, as we were just talking about, it's very important whether you feel loved. It's like if you are loved and you don't feel loved, it's as though it's not there. So it's so critical. It's more of kind of a gap in the research. We need to do more. And so we realized this, and that feeling loved is really what matters. And then really started to think about like what people can do to change that. How we can sort of change the conversations in our lives and in ways that where we can make ourselves feel more loved, but also make other people in our lives feel more loved too. I mean, that's also a goal of our book, is how do we make other people, because we also probably have people in our lives who don't feel as loved by us as much as we love them, right? So how do we fix that too?
Well, and this is one of the sort of dimensions of How to Feel Loved that I really loved myself, was when my first look at it at How to Feel Loved was, okay, wait, but isn't that about what we receive from others? But doesn't that render us kind of powerless, because we have to give to others and then hope we receive, which we don't always. But then when I really dived into your book, I realized that what you're really saying there is that everyone needs to feel loved. And I love your emphasis on don't wait to feel loved. Start right now,
Mm.
helping others feel loved. And
Exactly,
tell
exactly.
us about that. Yeah.
Yeah, there's two important points that you just pointed out. And one is this idea that when people don't feel loved enough, they think it's something about them, like they need to change themselves somehow, right? Like I need to make myself more lovable, right? I need to
Mhm.
show you the wonderful qualities that I have. or they need to somehow change the other person, right? Like I need to somehow convince you to love me more. And those all are things that may not be in our control, right? So that's something that we're challenging in our book. And then the other thing is, if you want to feel more loved, you need to go first, which is a little
Hmm.
counterintuitive, but it also puts it sort of squarely in your power, because it turns out, and I love this line because I think it really summarizes the whole book. If you want to feel more loved, you don't need to change yourself. You don't need to change the other person. You just need to change the conversation. Change the conversations that
Mm.
you're having with the other person. Because when you think about it, what is a relationship but a series of conversations? That's basically, especially if you
That's
define
right.
conversations broadly, right? Sometimes you don't have to actually be talking to have a conversation. And so, yeah, the first step is to make the other person feel more loved, and sort of and I think, and I've done that myself in my life. I had a family member that I was feeling sort of not so loved by. And I thought, okay, I need to figure out what is it that she needs from me, how to make her feel more loved. And I
Mm.
started doing that. So, um,
And I think by doing that, you took the power back into your own hands because there was now something you could do. And
very
this is the
empowering.
beautiful thing. Yeah, beautiful thing about loving is that when we give to others out of love, well, we can always give more or less. We have control over how we give, to whom we give, how much we give, but we have no control over what we receive.
Yeah.
And I like this, how you say we each of us needs to go first. I know many of our listeners, they often feel unloved, whether it's by an intimate partner, a friend, or a family member. And yeah, I think the framing of your book is just fantastic. Well, let's do this. We need to have a quick word from our sponsors, and then we'll be right back. So all of you out there, don't go anywhere. We're going to be right back with Dr. Sonja Lyubomirsky.
Is there a protective shell around your heart holding you back from the connection you know is possible in your life? It's time to find your path to redemption. Introducing Love and Suffering by Dr. Anthony Silard. In Love and Suffering, which has received 4 book awards in psychology and mental health and 99% 5-star reviews on Amazon, Dr. Silard overturns what we've been told over a lifetime about love, forgiveness, acceptance, and gratitude. New York Times bestselling author Adam Alter calls Love and Suffering a compelling roadmap for a more connected and meaningful life. When you order Love and Suffering, 100% of the author's proceeds are donated to nonprofit education programs in Africa and Latin America. Invite more love into your life today. Love and Suffering by Anthony Silard is available now at Amazon.com and wherever books are sold. What if everything you've been taught about happiness and friendship is wrong? The artoflivingfree.org, the learning platform of the Center for Social Leadership, would like to offer you 2 free books by Dr. Anthony Silard: The Myth of Friendship, How Your Misunderstandings About Friendship Keep You Lonely, and The Myth of Happiness, How Your Definition of Happiness Creates Your Unhappiness. Get your free personal copies of The Myth of Friendship and The Myth of Happiness today. It's simple and easy. Go to theartoflivingfree.org/free happiness and friendship books and enter your email, then confirm the confirmation email in your inbox. You'll receive the links to download The Myth of Friendship and The Myth of Happiness. Enjoy your 2 free books by Dr. Anthony Silard today at theartoflivingfree.org/free happiness and friendship books.
Hello, I'm Anthony Silard, and welcome back to ReSocial. I'm here with Dr. Sonja Lyubomirsky. Sonja, let's talk about loneliness, because this is one of the flip sides of feeling loved, is the loneliness. So people talk a lot about the loneliness epidemic these days. How is what you found about not feeling loved connected to loneliness? What's the relationship there? Are they the same problem or 2 different problems?
They're so highly connected. I think they're not exactly the same, but they're so highly connected. We think about loneliness and not feeling loved in terms of moments. And actually, I think it's a really wise approach to think of it as like, if when you're feeling lonely, like you're having a lonely moment, which by the way is much better than kind of saying I'm a lonely person, which really essentializes it and makes it into like a trait that's durable, right? So you're having a lonely moment, and a lonely moment is very similar to a moment when you don't feel loved. It's very similar to a moment when you don't feel like you belong. And so I think lack of belonging, loneliness, not feeling loved are very, very, very highly correlated.
Okay. Excellent. And you write, Sonja, that the need to feel loved and the need to belong are very similar. Can you tell our listeners more about this? How are they the same? Are they slightly different? How are they related?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're very, very much related. I mean, people talk about belonging in terms of often in terms of a community, a group, a family, group of friends, at work. So it's often broader. When we talk about feeling loved, we often talk about a particular person in our lives. So I think that's one difference. And so, yeah, that's kind of how I think about it. But feeling loved is often about a particular relationship in your life. But you can think about feeling loved at work. You can think about feeling loved, within your church, or feeling loved by a friend group. So I think when you think about it in terms of a community, then it's very, very similar. I'm not really even sure how to disentangle
Hmm.
those.
Yeah. I wonder if I belong, for example, I can belong in a marriage. I can belong in a relationship with family members. I can belong in a social group, in a club, and I wonder if feeling loved is it's part of it is about feeling like a sense of belonging, but then another part of it is about, you referenced Jane Dutton's work around high quality connections and sort of the momentary interactions that sort of build up into a high quality relationship. And so how would you tease apart like feeling a sense of belonging versus feeling a sense of emotional connection with someone else? Because you
Sure,
can
sure,
feel
sure.
like you belong. Like, for example, a couple can be sitting on the sofa watching a movie together, and they can feel like they belong to this marriage or to this relationship, but then they're not really talking, and maybe one of them doesn't feel so loved because they don't feel appreciated, or that the other is being very compassionate.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. No, thank you. Actually, thank you, Anthony. These are actually really great questions that I've actually never been asked before. So thank you for challenging me. But I think you're right that belonging is kind of like the first floor, the first level, and it's a necessary and sufficient to feeling loved. But feeling loved is kind of a more higher level. One way to think about it is that feeling loved involves feeling known, being known, and feeling understood and valued or respected, which is a little bit different from just simply
Hmm.
belonging. As you said, you could like belong, say, to like a community, but it doesn't mean that you really feel understood by it, that you really feel
Mm.
valued, respected by it. And so, yeah, so it is a kind of a higher level.
Okay, excellent, excellent. Yeah, it's super interesting to me, and I appreciate the way you clarify that, Sonia. So let's go back to what you were talking about earlier, about that some people, and I know a lot of our listeners struggle with this, is that they feel like they're not loved because they're not lovable. And what I hear you saying is actually that may not be the reason at all. That is not the reason at all that you don't feel loved. There's other things going on. Like what other kind of dynamics could
Exactly.
lead someone to realize it's not that you're not lovable, but there's other relationship dynamics leading to your not feeling loved.
Exactly. I think there's a lot of dynamics. The heart of it is to feel loved, you need to be known. As I really, that's one way that I summarize it.
Mm.
If you don't, Anthony, if you don't really know me, I will not feel loved by you, right? Because even if you say I love you, right, I won't trust it because I'm like, what is it? What part of me are you loving if you really don't know me, right? And so
Mm.
you need to be known. So I think we think of it as like I will feel loved if you know my positive qualities, right? That if I'm
Hmm.
lovable, right? And yes, of course, like it's important to work on ourselves and have positive qualities. But it's not. But the key is not really about positive qualities. Actually, it's really about being known by the other, including by being known for some of your weaknesses and shortcomings. And in fact, when we think about unconditional love, that's really what we're talking about, right? Is that I know you love me despite the fact that you knew that I did this bad thing, right? Or that you
Hmm.
know that I'm not a perfect person, like anyone, right? That I have shortcomings as well. And so it's really about being known. And there's something called the vulnerability paradox, which is
Hmm.
this idea that like if I'm vulnerable with you and I tell you some of my I don't know, like negative traits, that somehow that will make you like me less, but actually often it makes you like me more, because you see me kind of in a more complex way, because because like, you see me sort of as more human. That if I'm only showing you my highlight reel, then it's not authentic, and you don't, you may not really trust it. And so there's lots of examples of like actually people we like someone more when they're vulnerable with us. Of course, at the right pace, at the right time, and the right place, right? Doesn't mean you immediately let it all hang out and tell the other person all your negative faults.
And have you noticed any gender differences there? Because I've done some research on vulnerability, and I know that when I interview men, they are much more reluctant to be vulnerable. I've had guys tell me that being vulnerable would be like giving the keys to the fortress to someone else.
Yeah,
Whereas I
so
noticed that women
fascinating.
have generally, but of course, this is more of a pattern than a broad stroke. It depends on the individual, of course, man or woman.
Yeah.
But women often are more comfortable with vulnerability, and I think that's actually could be part of what makes it so difficult for men to form close relationships. But what's your take on that?
Yeah, absolutely. We actually have in the book we have a chapter on gender differences, on cultural differences, sort of personality differences. What role do they play? But it's so interesting. Actually, we could talk about this for hours. Sort of this, when you think about masculinity and femininity, sort of part of being part of masculinity is to be sort of strong and kind of like not being invulnerable in a way. And so, and there's actually, I've heard people talk about how this is really like sort of a challenge in modern society, is that women will say, I really want my partner to be vulnerable, to sort of talk about his feelings, to talk about his hopes, dreams, and fears and doubts, right? But then when they do, the men complain, then the women sort of don't like them as much, or sort of they don't.
Right. They think they're weak, they're needy, they're
Exactly.
dependent.
They don't find it hot, right? And so what's
Yeah,
hot
exactly.
is for the guy to be strong and masculine and dominant, and so, but I do think there's a very delicate balance there, that as I said, like at the right time, at the right place, for the strong man to reveal some of those vulnerabilities, it can be super hot and very intimate, right? And so, but yeah, there's a lot of emotional intelligence is involved on both sides to really like read the room, right? To kind of how much and how often to be a little bit vulnerable. But think back to that guy who's strong and dominant and masculine, and he's never vulnerable. He never shows any kind of negative side of himself. How can he feel loved? Right? How can he feel it? Because if the woman doesn't really know, again, we're talking about straight relationships. If the woman doesn't know him, he'll always wonder if she really knew me. If she really knew what I'm like on the inside, she wouldn't love me anymore. Right? So
Well,
that's
and
not.
this is the challenge facing men. What I find is that because I'm working on a book on gender and leadership and how men and women socialize, and what I'm finding is that men tend to focus on the 5 PRs, which to procreate, procreate, produce, provide, protect, and prove themselves. And what they
Love it.
miss are the 5 C's, like caring, compassion, connection, commiseration, cooperation. And then as a result, the women think that they're hot, yeah, because they're being dominant, but that's so short-lived. And then as they grow older, then we find these deaths of despair, and older men are just essentially they haven't form those close relationships to sustain them in their older age.
Exactly. Yeah. After divorce, or after
Yeah.
widowhood, that the men are doing much worse, right? Because they don't have the support, the emotional support, and the friendships that women have. But send me those 5 C's and 5 PRs. I think those are.
I will. I wish we didn't have to wrap up, Sonja, because I feel like we could talk for hours here. I'm definitely going to have to ask you back to continue. Well, let's say for anyone listening who wants to dig deeper into your work, where can they learn more about what you're doing?
Mhm. Well, the book, it's called How to Feel Loved, and the website is howtofeelloved.com, howtofeelloved.com, and everything's there. We actually have a quiz on it that people really like, which sort of tells them how good are they at sort of doing the things that make people feel loved. We talk about sort of mindsets to embrace that help you feel more loved or help the other person feel more loved. And so that's actually really illuminating. So howtofeelloved.com is probably the best place to go.
Howtofeelloved.com. Wonderful.
Yeah.
And for all of you listeners out there, I highly recommend this book, How to Feel Loved. It's fantastic, and you won't be disappointed. So loneliness is about not feeling truly known by anyone. The paradox is that the one thing most likely to change that is the one thing we're most afraid to do. let people see who we actually are. So we won't just be loved, but we'll also feel loved. Sonja, my day is a better one because of the connection we've further developed here today. I really appreciate you for coming in and sharing your wisdom with our listeners at ReSocial. Thank you for joining us, Sonja.
Thank you so much.
Let's end the way we always do. Until we meet again, please remember that between you and the CMSRs, the compassionate, meaningful, sustainable relationships you desire in your life, lies an invisible social barrier you construct in your mind. It's entirely up to you to push through this barrier and watch it disappear into the mist. Be the change you desire and reach out to another person. Then use the tools you learn, refine, and align with your own values in ReSocial to develop a CMSR. Be kind, be generous, and be caring. I'm Dr. Anthony Silard. Thank you for joining us on ReSocial. I'm looking forward to being together with you again next week in the world filled with CMSRs we are creating together.